Super Tuesday results are in. Joining me now with analysis is Jim Tankersley, a correspondent at The Washington Post, and Eliza Collins, a reporter at Politico. It's so good to see you both here.
Thank you for having us.
Jim,
thanks so much.
Let me start with you as a question right off the bat. Has Hillary Clinton essentially clinched the nomination?
It's not over yet for Hillary Clinton, but she's made it really hard on Bernie Sanders. All the momentum, if you will, is now in her favor. More importantly, Bernie Sanders needs a fundamental change in the race, particularly in the way he is able to connect with non-white voters if he has any shot. He needs a big comeback. He needs to win a ton of votes the rest of the way to win. It looks very much like the odds would favor a Clinton nomination at this point.
Eliza, over to you now with the GOP. What about Donald Trump? Is the GOP race still a little murky after Ted Cruz's showing?
You know, Donald Trump had such a strong showing. Ted Cruz won a few states and they were big, but Donald Trump just kind of took away with it. And it's looking more and more like the idea of getting behind another candidate is just less and less likely, especially since Marco Rubio only won in one state.
Jim, what are your thoughts on the GOP at this point? Are we going to see somebody drop out in the very near future?
So I think that the Republicans have a classic problem with an extra twist, which is they have a hard time getting all of the alternatives to Trump, if you will, to coalesce behind one candidate, but in particular a hard time because it's not necessarily in anyone's interest to drop out right now. If you're Marco Rubio and you want to be president someday, getting out and getting behind Ted Cruz, who could win in the fall and then win again and then put you, far back in line 8 years from now behind whoever his vice president is probably not your preferred outcome. You'd rather keep your options open to run in 4 or 8 years. So the same is true of Cruz with Rubio. Kasich's a little different, but he wouldn't matter as much if he got out, and certainly the same is true with Carson. So the game theory, if you will, for Republicans just looks good for Trump because his opponents are divided, and so long as they stay divided, I think he, particularly when you come to winner-take-all states, has a better chance to amass the delegates he needs to win the nomination.
What about on the money side? And Eliza, maybe you can jump in on this one. I mean, if you have these GOP candidates who want to stay in the race for a little bit longer, and we know Donald Trump doesn't need the kind of money that perhaps other candidates need at this stage in the game. But what happens with these big, important donors and kind of the establishment money, if you will?
Well, that's kind of the big question right now. A lot of the establishment money, the candidates in the race are staying in because they still have money. But the big conversation has been around really going after Trump and getting to attack him, which people are wondering why it didn't happen a lot longer or a while ago. So last night, some people met and really kind of ratcheted up the attacks on Trump. Tim Miller, who was formerly with Jeb Bush, joined a super PAC to take on Trump. But a lot of people are saying it's too late. You should have done this months and months ago. So there is money there, but it's just at this point a timeline issue.
Jim, how does the tenor of the race change? Let's start first on the GOP side. Will there be more conversations around issues? Will we see any of the candidates coalesce behind each other?
Well, I think we keep waiting for a great issues debate to break out on the Republican side. They've had smatterings of debates on the issues, particularly on foreign policy after the Paris terror attacks. But they've really not gotten into the details, and it's because their frontrunner doesn't have very many details, and Cruz doesn't have a ton of details either. Rubio's had a lot of details, but he chose in the last week to pursue an attack line that was very personal, to mock Donald Trump for the size of his hands and things like that. That doesn't appear to have worked very well for him on Super Tuesday in terms of actual votes, and I think that he is the guy to watch. Will he go after Trump on policy grounds in the next debate, or does he keep up with the personal attacks? Does he try both? And these super PACs who are coming in against Trump, are they going to go after him on his record, on his personality, on the issues? I think that the money is going to dictate, and the focus of the other candidates are going to dictate where that conversation goes.
And I think with Rubio especially, you even saw him really go after Trump last week and then kind of back off on these personal attacks. You know, on like Monday, he was starting to say things like, yeah, I kind of dabbled in it, but I'm stepping back. This is not really what I want to be doing. So we'll have to see if that's a path he's going to continue because it didn't really work for him last night.
Jim, on the Democratic side, why don't we talk about a Clinton-Sanders ticket? Are we going to talk about that? Wouldn't that make everyone happy?
I don't think it would make everyone happy, and I don't honestly think that there's very much chance of it. I think that, I'm not sure that Bernie Sanders really wants to be vice president at his age, and I certainly think that the Clinton campaign is going to be more strategic in terms of who they pick. They don't need to unify the party nearly as much as the Republican nominee is going to. If you look at the second, the questions on the polling to Democrats, if your candidate doesn't win, would you be happy with the other one? They're generally pretty happy. This is not a situation where Hillary has to absolutely pacify Bernie voters or risk losing a huge amount of their support in the fall. Now, she may pick someone from that wing of the party to try to shore up that support even more, but she has a lot of options, and the names that are being talked about, you never hear about Bernie Sanders.
Eliza, your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. I think that there are other names that Hillary Clinton could bring on as vice president that would do more to unite the party. So I think that people are kind of content if they like Hillary. They're not worried about who her vice president would be.
All right, Jim.
And I would say really fast on the Republican side on vice president. That's where the really fun strategery gets into play. If you're Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio right now, there's a decent, not enormous, but a decent sized push among some influential conservatives to try to get them together on a ticket, maybe as a way to consolidate their votes against Trump. The question, of course, would be who would be on top of that ticket. Neither of them really has much incentive to agree to be VP, but that's the sort of strategic pairing you might actually see a lot more pressure on in the next couple of weeks, because if somehow the establishment could get those guys to consolidate their support, and the supporters of those candidates did not go to Trump but stayed together, then you'd have a real race. And there's still time for that kind of a candidate, a Rubio, Cruz conglomeration to perhaps catch and pass Trump and the delegates.
All right, final thoughts from you two. Eliza, I'll start with you. What are the two most important things to watch on the Democratic side and the GOP side over the next couple of weeks?
I think we're going to need to watch with the Democratic side how Bernie Sanders is doing with minority voters. It's shown so far that Hillary Clinton is really doing so much better than he is. So I think to see what his campaign can do to kind of ratchet that up. Also, just as we go west, is there going to be a different kind of strategy? Can he pick up where he has kind of been lagging so far? And on the Republican side, I think something like a Cruz-Rubio ticket, is that actually possible? They're going to have to, the more establishment Republicans are going to have to get behind someone and really, can they do it? And then just, is this Trump train inevitable? He's been doing so well in the South and North and Nevada, but Nevada is a very interesting place. So how is he going to do moving west as well?
Jim, over to you for final thoughts on what to watch.
I think on the Democratic side, the question is how much is Bernie Sanders willing to do to try to shake up the dynamic of this race? He has a lot of money. Is he going to suddenly put it into a huge barrage of ads attacking Hillary Clinton? Is he going to put it into a huge outreach in states that he hasn't, the type of state he hasn't been as competitive in so far? What's he going to do with that money, and how serious is he about trying to make up this gap, so to speak, is the big question there. On the Republican side, I think that the really interesting thing to watch is home states. John Kasich's home state votes in 2 weeks in Ohio. Marco Rubio's home state votes in 2 weeks in Florida. They basically, I think, have to win those states if they have any rationale for going forward. And if they both were to lose, that would certainly leave Ted Cruz as the only other candidate to have won his home state. And so, that would possibly winnow the field by itself. And then, of course, could be too late. Enough delegates may have gone to Trump that he was cruising for the nomination, so to speak, then. So, but those are the two places I'm watching, Ohio and Florida.
Jim Tankersley, Eliza Collins, so good to talk to both of you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Rhonda Schaffler for TheStreet.